Melyssa Ford snaps on the Joe Budden Podcast.
Don't act like I haven't had to work my ass off and that pretty privilege has allowed me to coast through fucking life. Don't you fucking dare. It's because of you fucking letting that narrative carry on. It's bullshit.
Time out.
You think that I coasted through this first season of Hot and Bothered?
Yes.
No, the I did not. No, the I did not.
Oh,
the odd mention up here has been really great, but did it put money in my pocket? No. I've been my own everything at some point like
facts,
that.
Facts.
Y'all, you know what this? How about this?
Don't
with me.
Don't get mad.
Don't start with me.
Okay.
On the last Patreon of the Joe Budden Podcast, Melyssa Ford snapped on her co-host for undervaluing her efforts in creating the Hot and Bothered podcast and also making fun of her age. Hot and Bothered was a podcast launched by Melyssa Ford, full of ups and downs, ins and outs. Initially, it was called the Menopod Podcast, and she had two friends co-hosting it, S and someone else I don't know. But things quickly went awry when Melyssa Ford tried to usurp ownership of the name, give them contracts.
It was an idea that I came up with. I shared it with her, with another friend of mine, Tanya, and then I came up with the name. We didn't get to the contract. We didn't get to anything. She just started announcing it. And then basically when it's like, you know, it was my idea. I came up with the name. I trademarked it. And we've been working on it collectively. Like, it was supposed to be a partnership. And then it turned into the Menopod with Melyssa Ford. And I'm just not with that.
And she would have to go and find another name. And she would come up with Hot and Bothered. But here's the thing. Hot and Bothered also belonged to someone else. So she had to change that to the Hot and Bothered Podcast with Melyssa Ford. And from its launch, it struggled mightily as she was embracing something that I don't think engineers much clicks, especially for someone who is new to the field of women's health. Yeah, that's right. Melyssa Ford was going to talk about women's health. The episodes would do really bad views. I'm talking in the hundreds, sometimes cracking 1,000 and occasionally 10,000. However, she would start to crank it up when she would talk about her personal life, specifically the Cat Lady episode, and also interview Jadakiss. And now we arrive to this episode of the Joe Budden Podcast Patreon, where Melyssa Ford was ridiculed. And people said she didn't really put in much work in creating the podcast, and she wasn't having it. Now, why did the members of the show feel so comfortable in questioning why she didn't do that much work? Well, you have to look at what Flip's been saying, even in jest. He's been kind of hinting how people are working for Melyssa Ford and maybe not getting compensated. He even made a joke recently on one of the previous episodes that Melyssa Ford was leveraging her position on the Joe Budden Podcast in order to get some favors. And I think all of these guys know how Melyssa Ford gets down, so maybe they have some insights into perhaps people are doing stuff for her just because she's Melyssa Ford and she's attached to the Joe Budden Podcast. Now, obviously, she wants to navigate away from that, but who knows? There's also a variety of other things that were covered here that I think are interesting. It seems like Ish is still very cool with S. Now, S is the lady I mentioned earlier, who used to be a co-host of the now defunct Menopod podcast that actually recorded 5 episodes but couldn't be released due to contractual issues and a whole bunch of issues that were, basically coming down to Melyssa Ford is not a girl's girl. And if you even look at everybody who's Melyssa Ford has let on the show that has been attached to her, S and Sabrina, they all seem not to be cool with her now. So I don't know what it is. Melyssa Ford just can't seem to keep a friend. And now everybody seems to know that, but they leave it alone. And S being cool with Ish, I wonder how Melyssa Ford feels about that. But let me know what you think in the comments. Do you feel like Melyssa Ford is self-made? Does she receive perks as a result of her celebrity? Of course she does. I mean, some of the stuff she was saying, reminded me of the mother or the father that brags about raising their daughter or son. Like, I clean the Pampers. I take them to school. She was saying stuff like, I edit the videos. I put the time code. I do all of this. It's self-funded. Well, what do you think it was going to be? And she says it so much that I think she was probably asking Joe Budden for support or thinking he was going to come in some way to help her out. And that's another thing Melyssa Ford didn't acknowledge. Being part of the Joe Budden podcast has led her to a wealth of knowledge. Ian's there giving her information. Joe's there giving her information. Hell, even Flip said recently that he helped Melyssa Ford out. So, Melyssa Ford is trying to show us that she's a self-made woman, but I think she isn't, and the guys on the podcast know that's the case. Yeah, only time will tell. Melyssa Ford also very sensitive about her age. I know that's something that she's passionate about, which is why I think she did a women's health podcast. And we're going to have to see how it all plays out for the Hot and Bothered podcast. I really feel like it's a layup for her to fix whatever is going on. All she has to do is go to her channel, do this little thing right here, go to the most viewed, click that, and just see which videos are the most viewed. Once she does that, she will see what really resonates, and it's gonna be all good. Double down on that content. Now, I know a lot of folks are like, Danny, but she wants to do women's health. Well, if her audience doesn't care about that, they don't care about that. They want to see her sit down with Corinne Steffens. She even interviewed some smaller lady that was a video vixen, Natasha Ellie. I'm sure she was popular in her day. But imagine if she interviewed somebody she actually had friction with. Oh my God, those numbers would be through the roof. When she talked about her romantic life, a lot of people cared. The manosphere ate it up. And I feel like it's a layup. It's a layup. What people want to see her do. Once she starts doing that, I'm not saying she's going to be as big as the Joe Budden podcast, but her numbers will start to rival a couple episodes. They'll be up there with Flip's Improper Improv. Remember, Improper Improv was doing like 90 to 130,000. Melyssa Ford, when she interviewed Jadakiss, man, she showed y'all something. Then she did that episode where she sat down and just talked to a camera. That's hard to do. You got to give Melyssa Ford credit for that. But I think the aura of a self-made podcaster pulling herself up by her bootstraps, I don't think that's necessarily the case. And I do feel like she is leveraging her celebrity to get people to do things for the low. And I think she's tapping into her resources. Guys like Flip, Joe Budden, even Parks, asking them for advice. And everybody knows it. So that's why they laugh at the stuff she says about her being self-made. Guys, I got a secret to tell you. I don't know if you guys know this, but it's pretty painfully obvious. Everybody on that show knows the real Melyssa Ford. So that's why when she speaks and she makes certain statements, they giggle. They laugh. They look at each other. They make awkward eye contact. I know y'all going to say, oh, it's because she's a woman that you're saying this, Danny. No, it's just, this is what they're doing. This is not me. This is them. There's a disconnect between what Melyssa Ford says on camera and how she acts off camera, which is why the rest of the cast don't really be digging her vibe and what she says on air. But let me know what you think in the comments. Remember, this was on Joe Budden's Patreon. Make sure you tap in. Follow me on Instagram, The Stop TV. Follow me on Twitter, The Stop TV. Follow me on Patreon, The Stop TV. This is Danny from The Stop. Peace.
Hey, Danny. Congratulations on launching your YouTube channel. That is a big deal, honestly. There's a lot of people who think about doing things and never actually get up off their butts to actually do it. So congratulations on that. When it comes to the haters, I mean, that's just life. I mean, I can't tell you how many haters I've had over the 2 decades I've been in this business. And it's, it's not always easy dealing with them, but if you know that you're talented, if you know that what you're doing brings you a sense of joy and you have a passion for it, the haters will, honestly, they're just confused fans.